Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to revisit using spray devices, including just a sort of cleaning type spray bottle, a pressurized refillable spray bottle, and we may also take a little look at the Wilton Color Mist food coloring spray to see what kind of effects we can get on yarn. I often have people asking me if you can do this to get speckles, and I believe that you could technically get some tiny specks, but mostly, in my opinion, what these sprays are good for with regards to yarn is that you can get some light coverage and light washes of color and glazed effects on the yarn. So in my opinion, that is the really fun result here. Now, I do have a video where I played with a lot of different spray painting techniques. I think I did spraying and stenciling on sock blanks in a live stream a long time ago. But since it was a live stream, that isn't really as easy to access, and that was focusing on blanks. So let's do this on just a skein of Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. And then in another video, I will look at these same devices on an actual blank as well, because using these devices on a sock blank will give you shallow coverage, and then when you unravel that blank you'll get some amazing speckles, which with some of my rainbow blanks and two-sided blanks, I'll link to some of those videos in the description. You can get some amazing results, and so that's the kind of thing that I love these devices for. I did also track down this spray pen, which is something I haven't used in years. It's just a tiny little spray device. So we'll have a few different things to compare to one another in this video. Now, I am planning to use food coloring so we can compare these devices to the spray food coloring that I love to use. But you can definitely, theoretically fill these devices with acid dyes as well. But if you're gonna fill these devices with non-food safe dyes, then they are dedicated for dyeing and should not be mixed back into food preparation or used even in combination with other food dishes that you might use to dye yarn. So I am personally comfortable dyeing yarn with food coloring using my kitchen pots and pans, as long as all the tools I'm using are still food safe. When you're dyeing yarn with food coloring, you need 4 things. You need the artificial food coloring, you need acid, you'll need heat, which we'll get from the microwave later, and then you need a protein-based yarn. So wool, alpaca, silk, those things all work great. This will not work on acrylic or cotton or other cellulose and synthetic fibers. With food coloring, I prefer to have the acid and the food coloring come into contact with the yarn as late in the process as possible. So I'm adding the acid to our pre-soak today. I added 3 to 5 tablespoons of white vinegar in with this plain tap water. And I'm gonna let the yarn soak for about 30 minutes. Her little pen is going to be really pigmented. I filled it up about halfway with water, and I'm going to add 1 drop of the Colorite Base Crimson food coloring. I'm now going to add on the lid and shake things up really thoroughly, and then I will fill this the rest of the way with water, but this should be fairly pigmented. Yeah, and you can see how much color is in there, but I'm gonna go add more liquid. The Misto I filled about 1/4 of the way full with water, and let's go ahead and add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops of the base pink, so that way it is a little more pigmented. And then I am going to put this back together. I haven't used this in years, and so when the color first comes out, I just tested it. It'll likely be pretty clear, but when we're ready to use it, we can pump it up to add the pressure, so then we can start spraying. Finally, in our big spray bottle, which I filled with about 200 milliliters, I'm gonna add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drops of the Color Right base orange color. I know that we have an orange over here, but I wanted something that was fairly pigmented so that way we'll be able to see if it makes a difference, and if I need to add more orange, I will. And I know this is also an orange, but we will compare it on the yarn while it's wet and then probably move things around. My plan is to compare all of these colors on the yarn while it is wet, and then depending on the results that we see, we might go a little more wild and add a lot more color to the yarn. It all depends on what we see. But one thing I want to add now is that a lot of times people often say, hey, spray from much, much further away, which is great, but the further away you spray, the further the drops will go, and so the more potential mess you might make. So that is something that I would like to caution you and keep in mind as you are working on this. But I'm going to protect the work surface now with some plastic wrap so we can get started. Here is our pre-soaked yarn, and I gently squeezed out as much of the liquid as possible. And now, actually, I think I'm going to get some gloves so I don't completely stain my hands. Let's start with our spray bottle that I think I'll have the least amount of control over, and starting maybe 8 inches above. Oh, actually, I'm going to go into the sink. I sprayed a couple times in the sink to get color coming, and then I'm about 8 inches up, and I sprayed. Let's zoom in. Yeah, we've got some speckling. The color is not that pigmented, and we do have a wash of color, but technically it worked. Let's add a little bit more orange to our bottle, and by a little bit more, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. I added about 6 drops more to the bottle. I'm going to go stir it up and clear the nozzle so we get that more concentrated color ready to go. Okay, again, about 8 inches up. And I did a full spray. I see specks, but mostly it is a wash of color. Let's try over here, like not a full spray. Oh, okay, so that ended up with a dribble. Let's try further away. Ah! Okay, so that one worked the best. We got speckles, but I had to do not a full spray from fairly far away, but technically it did work. Now, would I be able to do this all over the whole thing? Probably not. I think that might be hard, but it is technically possible. It's just, I know that if I was going to try to do this all over a whole skein, what I would get would mostly look like this compared to that. Now, let's compare it with our Misto. Let's see, if I'm really far away, you don't see any color at all. When I come in, then you start to see the color, and the pigmentation difference from what I made custom and what we have here is fairly extreme. I'm just adding some more color to that end. So having this further away doesn't really result in any color. If I have it high up, maybe you could get some more pastel, but I don't think I really see a ton of speckling from the color mist in general. We will be playing with a sock blank later, so I will be able to play with all of these a little more. Here is our spray paint pen. Okay, so too close and too far. I got a few specks, but if I do, a partial, you know, we're mostly getting coverage, and I think the coverage, the coverage is shallow. So similar, not as pigmented because of how I mixed it, but similar to what we saw, with the color mist. The coverage is shallow, but I'm not really seeing speckles with this spray pen. And what I mean by light coverage is that if I pick up one of these strands and turn it over, you don't see color on that other side. So the color really is staying on the level where you sprayed it. And this is what we're really used to seeing with the color mist as well, that you get very, very shallow color coverage. Okay, let's try the pressurized one, and I'm gonna pump it up so we get as much pressure as possible. And then from high up, I do see some speckling, especially if I do, okay, maybe you guys didn't see those, but I will bring you over. With the lightest touch, I did get some speckles with our Misto Sprayer. You probably want the dye to be even more concentrated because a lot of what we get, and there is speckling in here, but overall, these are better, in my opinion, for getting a light wash of color. Are speckles present? Yes, technically, we got speckles of all three. Is it easy to control? No, absolutely not. In fact, I find that it is really, I think that it would take a lot of practice. And this speckling right here is beautiful. If I felt that I could consistently get this light layer of coverage versus the wash, then I would be happy. But the lack of consistency that you see is not what I like about this potential technique. Okay, let's stay really far back. Okay, you know, this cleaning spray bottle, okay, you can get large speckles being pretty far back. And I don't feel like I was making that much of a mess. So I'll amend what I was saying. The large spray bottle, you can't spray the whole thing. You have to be light and you have to stay pretty far back, but that worked. We have light specks there. Okay, there's still a lot of pressure in there. Let's stay high up. You know, high up, whoops, a little too close. I am probably between 1 and 2 feet away. I have no idea what kind of mess this is leaving all over my area. I am now moving the yarn around. This is going to be a fairly random colorway. I'm trying to get some speckles that will remain. Oh dear. Yeah, this is definitely messy. Very, very messy. I'm having, oh, and I got food coloring on my floor. So it's working. Stuff is going all over the work area and I don't have a ton of control over the pigmentation that we're seeing. I am gonna add some bursts of this color just for some amount of consistency. And I think I'm gonna come in with the pen and just add, again, just adding some more pigment. So the thing is, we technically got things that I consider and call speckles on here. I'm gonna go heat set this now so we can sort of set this color, but then I'll come back and we'll chat. So I'm now wiping up the area, and this could have used a yarn mop, and I'm gonna go and wipe the floor because food coloring can stain, and the color definitely went beyond the area where we were working. Here is the yarn out of the microwave, and I do see subtle speckles here. It is sort of pastel. Maybe I would call it speckled, but maybe once it's dry, when I go to list it in my shop, I would call it a light wash of color. Either way, I think that this yarn is beautiful, even if I'm not like jumping to try this more and more. But actually, look at those speckles we got on our nylon zip tie. But anyway, I'm gonna set this aside to cool completely so then we can wash it. So I'm being pretty pessimistic with this technique because it's so messy and a bit wasteful. I mean, I think that it would be so much easier to make your own food coloring sprinkles with sugar or something. That works so well and wasn't something I was aware could work as well as it does. So I greatly prefer that to using these spray bottles. There's a lot of liquid left in the bottles. We will have a bonus skein at the end of the videos that I will be creating with these spray bottles. And I'm probably gonna do another 2 or 3 videos with spray techniques. And those other ones are gonna be spray techniques that I actually enjoy more. Now, dyeing yarn comes to a lot of personal preference. And there are things that I might enjoy doing that you don't enjoy doing and vice versa. So while the effects are pretty cool, but I don't recommend it because I don't like the lack of control I have over the technique. And so that is my preference. And even if I bumped up the concentration of dyes, so these were more pigmented, that leads to more mess and potentially more waste after the fact. So those are all my pessimistic reasons here. That being said, I am very excited with this colorway that we are creating. And oh, I'm microwaving it on high in a microwave safe dish covered for a total of 4 minutes using 2-minute increments. And now we can go peek at it. I think we'll be able to make the most conclusions once the yarn is completely dry, because everything is very subtle right now and these differences might feel even more subtle when dry, or could be a little more like exaggerated. We'll be able to see that difference a bit better. So I can already say this is not my favorite technique, but it works. And just like when it comes to speckling with powder, which I like to do with my hands because I like that control, different people, the more you play with a technique, the more experience you get with it, and then the more reproducible kind of results you can get. Do I think that this technique deserves more exploration? Yes, absolutely. I think that there is potential here. I just don't think that I'm the right person to do that exploration because there are so many other yarn dyeing techniques that excite me more, where I would like to sort of focus my attention. But I am glad that I did take a look and revisit this technique, especially because it is something that gets requested so often. Here is our fun spray painted yarn. One thing I would really like to get at some point is an airbrush to use with food coloring. But anyway, I'm not expecting to see any colors bleed. We're gonna add some dish soap to the rinse, and I'll rinse it a couple times after this, but I'm not seeing any bleeding. So I'll rinse out the soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and then hang it up to dry. Here is the finished sprayed, speckled, sort of speckled yarn. When you look at it from far away, you see something that feels fairly pastel and variegated. But when I zoom in, you start to be able to see some speckles. And if I zoom you in even further, then you can really see them. And here's an area where you can really see it as well. How could I get more obvious speckles versus having them, and they're definitely present, but they are just really subtle. Even in this area where they are heavy, I am unsure how it'll come across on camera. Now, this worked way better than I thought, but how could we get something that it has more pigmentation? Really, the answer to that is by increasing the pigmentation of what you have in your spray bottles. I think all of them pretty much worked. It takes it'll take some practice to get used to the amount to spray and to get a good feel for that. But you do have to stop pretty quickly, because if I kept spraying in any of these areas, then you wouldn't see the little specks anymore, and instead you would get a more light wash of color. So personally, I find this technique a lot more difficult than making DIY sugar sprinkles or something like that. I find that it's a lot easier to spread out the speckles when you have a little more control, and having more of a powder is really, really helpful there. Or even the control of having a paintbrush. I also get a lot of questions about using a toothbrush to or paintbrush to sort of flick the color onto the yarn. And these are things that I have not explored. But if you have, feel free to share your pictures with me on Instagram. I'm just at ChemKnits. Feel free to tag me. I would love to see your results. Although I'm curious about the toothbrush and paintbrush flinging, I think I even bought some paintbrushes specifically with that in mind. It all comes down to the same hesitation I have with these spray bottles, and that is the mess. If you can have an area, say in a bathtub, or you're outside where you can easily clean up any overspray, then I think that this could work well if this is something that really excites you. But working on the countertop, I cleaned up more overspray from the counter beyond where I had the protected surface and my floor than I do with any other technique for dyeing. So that is just worth keeping in mind. I love this yarn. I am very happy with the results, but this particular technique is not my favorite application for these spray bottles. And in an upcoming video, I will show off what I love to use these spray bottles for, and that is on sock blanks. And because you can really get shallow color to give you some really cool speckles when you unravel the yarn. And so that is my personal preference for spray bottles. But let me know what you think down in the description, and if this is a technique that you would personally like to explore more in the future or not. I will say, I'm impressed that I actually got this to work. I have an old spray bottle video from pre-Dye Pot Weekly where I thought that maybe I'd get speckles and I didn't. And, because of that one video, I was like, I don't think that this will work. And I'm really glad that I really tried. I think that the summer mini skein mini-series video with the spray from the Easter egg speckle kit, I think that that really convinced me that it's worth giving this another shot, another try, and I'm really glad that you guys have been requesting this and that I did. If there is a dyeing technique or dye type that you really want to see, please leave a request down in the comments below. I keep track of all of the suggestions that you guys submit, and the more frequently something comes up, the sort of bumps things up the queue for me. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and make sure your notifications are turned on by smashing that bell icon. And if you've been a fan for a while but want to help support the content on another level, I do have a Patreon. You can find a link down in the video description. One of the perks for all patrons is that every month I give a poll which shapes the direction of the Dye Pot PS series. And so it's a great way for you guys to vote and help pick a video that I'm going to make more on the short-term scale versus the long-term. I plan to do that someday. And so it's a really fun way for you to directly influence the direction of the content. Thank you so much for watching.